Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, so in this this will be the final of our
Yeah,
part interviews.
I'll try and cover
Uh,
as much as
this
possible.
one now we will begin it when you start your second prison sentence. You were immediately onto what's known as the blanket protest, which you might explain a bit, and then the no wash, and eventually the hunger strike. So yeah, you might take us to like day one of you starting your second prison sentence, and remind us when it was if you could.
Yes, well, my second prison sentence started in September 1977 when I was given 14 years by a non-jury diplomat court, just one judge. And believe it or not, that judge had only been shot by the provisional IRA coming out of a courthouse in Belfast. But anyhow, it was just all part of the conveyor belt system, and that there might need explaining in some other way, but you were just lifted off the streets, brought into the court, thrown into jail, and brought to and sentenced. It was known as the conveyor belt system of bringing anybody in. But anyway, I started on the blanket on early, I think it was around about second week September, and I remained on the blanket right through till it ended in October. I think it was October 17th, 1981, and so on. So, but a very, very hard time because this was we had found ourselves at the very heart of the what they call it, the political struggle, in that the whole policy being operated by the then Labour government and later by the Tory government was very simple. It was one of criminalisation, to try to criminalise us, and it was all part of a much wider process to defeat Republicans and so on. But uh, that was all part and parcel of denying the prisoners' right or to what they called it free association, and to all the demands that we made at that time. I made 5 demands, simple demands. I'll just go through them again. But the inside in the jails in the meantime, at the start, things weren't too bad. You had your furniture in the cells. You had didn't wear a prison uniform, so you were really just using a blanket or a towel in the cells, and that's how it was. But then, of course, things escalated. And how they escalated is very simple. Is that men had to slap out, men had to urinate and defecate in their cells into call a sluice, or what do you call it, a place where you done all the slaps, and that's what's called, sorry. And men were being brought out of their cells, and on the way down to to slap out, as they call it, they were getting beaten, and they were getting searched. Everything was being searched, because at this time it wasn't so much a no wash protest, but it was a no. The boys didn't conform, and the big beards and everything else, no, and so on. But this is what started it off. Next, the escalation went straight into um, destroying all the prison cell furniture in every wing, um, refusing to slap out because the beatings were taking place as well. When men did slap out, men were getting this was psychological torture. You're waiting to go out to slap out an essential element to exist in your cell. You can't live with piss and cake all day. But and what happened was very escalated to no wash protest, which meant that there was no slap out, and simply you had to defecate in your cell and urinate in the cell, and the excrement was then spread on the wall. That was strategic because it dried out a lot quicker. But I mean, your excrement, there's two men in each cell, and you can imagine how it was. The cells are now completely empty. You have two pieces of what are really sponge, uh, supposed to be mattresses, and you had two piss pots, or pots we call them, and you had a gallon of water, and that's all that was in the cell. However, people had to survive in that there, and putting the excrement on the wall and breaking out all the windows of each cell and so on. This was all gradual. This didn't take place in one night. This escalation was very, very gradual, but it left us in a very, very situation where, you know, it's not about health and hygiene, it's about existing. And, when you wake up in the morning and find maybe up to 30 or 40 maggots crawling around you out of a, a heap of dead, rotting food mixed with maybe urine, you understand what squalid conditions you are living in. So this is what we had existing for a long, long time. The schools would come in. How the regime uh, tackle this was very simple. They left one wing in each block empty so that each wing population could be rotated. And when one wing was empty, they would go in and power wash using chemicals, heavy chemicals too, and using power washes. They were dressed like something out of the plague. Uh, I'm talking about the screws here. We're just completely what they call come in, done every wing, moved every wing, and with every wing shut there was beatings. Men were just transferred from one wing to the other, completely naked in the winter, summer, whatever the weather, it didn't matter. And it was an ordeal. I don't think anyone will ever forget. It was a sort of what they call it, run the gauntlet, and so on, from one uh, prison wing to another. So there we were on the blanket on a no wash protest, and I mean it's hard to convey to you the imagery of what we're seeing on a day and daily basis, unless you've seen some of the films. You can imagine what it was like. You've seen all the imagery throughout the world of what it was like. Well, that's just exactly what it was like, and we had to endure, and men had to live together in the cells too. Maybe 28 or 30 men in a wing. You can imagine that there at 7 or 8 o'clock every night. We slept out under the door, or urine under the door mat that was all down in the middle of each wing of the haste block. You can imagine the smell. But the screws, they were getting paid good money for being in these blocks, danger money, and also for what they call it, money for taking a risk to their health and everything else. And they never got it easy at all either, but were quite welcome to what they call take the good pair to do it and so on. It was their job, as far as they were concerned, an extraordinary job at that, no doubt, but they willingly done it.
Can you to a lot of people, I think to a lot of people on the outside looking in, especially the element in the no wash protest of wiping excrement on the wall, it would seem almost kind of like self-defeating, or kind of cutting off your nose to spite your face. Could you go into the like the logic and the reasoning
Yeah.
behind that particular?
Well, it's like everything else. You find yourself in a crisis crux or a situation like that there, and your back is against the wall, and what are you going to do? And how is this going to be terminated? How is all this pain and suffering being endured in the blocks? And what can you do, and how can you respond? And I mean, Brandon Hughes would have been the commanding officer at that time, and he and his squad, or his staff, so to say, had to make a lot of decisions in relation to what men could endure and what men could not endure. And a lot of men didn't pay, does not depend whatsoever what rank they might have held within any organisation, but they just could not do it, especially older men. Imagine you're living in a cell, you're locked up 24/7 here, and month in, month out, year in, year out, you're let 1 hour out a week, and that's to go to mass, and you're back in the cell. So you're locked up 24 hours a day, for day in, day out, and so on and so on, for years. And people have to acknowledge that and try to imagine what that would be like. And for 2 or 3 of those years, over 2 years, men putting excrement on the wall and spreading it. It isn't fair on the wall to do it with their hands. There all different mechanisms to which they applied to spread the excrement, but it had to be spread fairly thinly, and that was happening. That there's no windows in each cell, so the air came in and dried it out quickly. It made it bearable.
How okay,
Just
so
about. Yeah.
for all these years of being naked and in a cell with the walls covered with your own excrement, your hands of course must be covered in it, your hair and beard and stuff.
Yeah.
Can I
Well, you
how
did
did
wash your
how was
hands. That was one of the most important things, your personal hygiene, because and let me tell you and illustrate my story, right? After you had spread, you had water there to wash your hands in the cell. It was a gallon of water, it might be 2 gallons of water, you understand? And you could use that water, it was for drinking water. But you use that there to clean your hands as best you could. You know what I mean? Because you just have to spread an excrement. You don't know what was in that excrement and what it is. But I remember, for example, there was an outbreak of worms in the wing. What I mean by that is there was worms being observed in everybody's excrement when they went to the toilet, and quite a lot of them. And this was a fair big outbreak in the wing, and it had to be what do you call it, sort of in order for us, in order to get rid of the worms, we all had to take medication. One of the medications was a pink tablet, must have been the size of an old penny, about an inch diameter. It was pink, and we broke these up and ate them anyway. And these were supposed to kill the worms in our excrement before, of course, we went to the toilet. And what came out was a pink shite, and not just a pink shite, but hundreds of dead worms in that there. So you can imagine what we were observing and seeing, and that didn't happen to everybody, but it happened to quite a few boys who had used this particular tablet, So, and you would have thought maybe there's something wrong with you until you realise that it was the tablet had caused this here. But look, that brings it right down to the wire there in terms of trying to describe or convey to people exactly what it was like.
okay, so during all this in all this terrible conditions, how do you keep your mind sane when you're locked inside 24/7 with no reading material, right? Nothing at all. How do you keep yourself sane?
Exactly, and that has been well as a we have looked at that there in so many ways as to how men did stay sane in them conditions, no given the beatings and everything else, and all right. And when you look back at it, it was really a nocturnal existence in the haste blocks in the sense that, after the screws had left the wings, the main body of screws had, gone out of the blocks, and you were left with the night staff and everything else. And all. Well, that's when life really kicked into. Uh, so it kicked in for everybody to get up and talk, relax, and then organize a few events like a sing song, getting maybe learning Irish, of course, learning the Irish language was a big factor as well, and boys had an opportunity to do it. They could write on the wall, keep a clear space or a clean space on their prison, on their cell wall, and they would use the bottom on the toothpaste tube, which are made of lead, of course, to write on the walls. And they learned all the verbs and all the adjectives and all the different nouns and so on. It was essential for us to communicate first and foremost within the blocks without the screws knowing what we were saying. Before that, there we used a slang language. Slang is a transient language within the prison, and that it is used at different times in different ways and changes and varies. But slang was very important so that you could communicate with each other vocally within the prison or within the blocks and communicate so that the screws would not uh, understand fully what you were saying and communicating. So there's a lot of things that went on. We had the survival. You also had boys telling stories was a big thing. Like the old Shanachie, and it must be something built into our Irish psyche because when the boys were up telling really good stories, maybe a book they had read and had memorized that book fairly fairly, what do you call it, lucidly, and they could convey to us, no, and they would tell that book with all the little add-ons and ad-libs, and but it was a nice way to get the night over and eventually get to sleep, which is usually in the early hours of the morning. But the daytime was just a thing where you always on your guard, always waiting for something to happen, news of something coming in, men beat in the wings, all the boys brought down to the punishment blocks and beatings. What was happening outside? Can we get a little whiff of news of what was happening? Was there any developments? Is this year going to come to an end? Is there any sense of an ending at all? So you can see how the psychological impact of all that there I'm trying to describe, you know what I mean? And years later, a number of what do you call it, research uh, documents were published into the long-term effects of, so the psychological long-term effects of sorry, long-term imprisonment, psychological impact, and men were still, in many ways, when they'd left the prison, a lot of it had stayed in their heads and their memories and their minds, and it had a traumatic uh, impact on their day-to-day existence and their day-to-day uh, struggle to adapt and change to a way of life that has long gone, maybe 15, 16, 17, 18 years gone. So that's how we adapted.
Fair enough.
Adapt.
Would you say would you say that there's any, I don't know, like psychological patterns or just anything maybe even in regards to like cleanliness or to being stuck inside that stay with you after prison that you had to like develop through your time spending 24 hours in a cell?
Well, yes, I mean, obviously you're glad to get away from that situation because that's human nature and everything, hasn't it? And you know, for a long time, boys are, you know, I've heard of them. I mean, after the dirt protests, washing their hands prolifically, you know, and had other trades and traits and things like that there about their own cleanliness, their hygiene, and everything else, and all, and this fear that it might what they had gone through, the trauma and all, had might return in some sort of physical form. You know, you think, and they would maybe wash their hands at every odd different occasion. And I've seen people taking showers, you know, when they didn't really need a shower, you know, and so there's that there part, but it's other deep trauma of having endured the brutal beatings and torture and listening to others enduring it, and to the whole environment was oppressive, you know, it's Kafkaesque if you want to put in that in them terms, and in other terms it was almost gothic, it was like a horror show.
You said you mentioned in one of our previous interviews that there's something especially traumatic about getting beaten by multiple men while being without your clothes as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be the same for any human when you're still naked, you are very vulnerable and you feel it and you're aware of it. And you obviously you're heightened awareness of it and so on, you know, and you're thinking to yourself, right, you've just heard maybe beatings going on up the wing and it was coming down to down to each cell, men being dragged out of their cell, pulled out, beaten, slapped in the wing, middle of the wing, dragged up the wing and into another wing, through into a cell. And you know, you're sitting there and we were all young men. The average age of the blanket man at that time was 22, 23, if it was that. Do you understand? Most of us all young men. I used to pity the older men, and we laugh now because the older men at that time for us were only in their late 30s and mid 30s. Do you understand? So you can imagine all these young men, the trauma that was caused, the psychological trauma.
Seamus Carney, Seamus Carney, who I also interviewed, who was on the blanket as well,
Yeah.
said he said I think for the entire time you were on like on like the lowest grade of feeding, like it was called like starvation diet.
Oh, well, starvation diet is one of the punishment diets which they used are utilised. It was long, long well out of use. All these old Victorian uh, recipes for trying to suppress punishment. That was really just bread and water in the old Victorian system. Bread and water was a punishment. That or bread and gruel, and a long time elapsed. But it was resurrected for the purpose of being an instrument to suppress us, to starve us, to get right into the psychological, depths of being deprived of basic comfort and basic food and so on. If they could do anything, if they could put you into a cell naked, one blanket round you, and no mattress or nothing, that's taken out in the morning time at 5 o'clock, and you're lying there with just simply on boards. But on board, I mean, when I say boards, I mean hard deal boards, and you're trying to survive and everything else now. So you can imagine the trauma of you being in a punishment block and hear other people getting beaten in the punishment block, and the hard screws beating young men who were screaming for to be left alone. And you could hear this here. I know everybody else in the wing could hear it, but it seems to fell on the deaf ears of all the governors and the sort of so-called board of visitors, and it fell deaf on the political leaders and so on. But it did happen. And the end result was, as we have covered this ground, what, 25 to 30 screws executed, and those all them hard men who carried out all them beatings, did they ever give one consideration to their colleagues who were trying to what they call do their job as just ordinary, career screws? But now, with what was happening in the criminalisation process, we as Republican prisoners found ourselves at the very gap of danger in the struggle, and those forces opposed against us was now made up of people within the prison service. It's unbelievable that this what they call institution should be even involved in anything like that there, but they were used by the Tory government and the Labour government, and what do you call it? I can tell you now that the little what do you call it? The little Yorkshire dictator in the Labour Party was no different from Michael Atkins in the Tory Party. Forget his name now.
I wanted to ask you there. I wanted to ask you there. What was it? Okay, yeah. You mentioned about guards at some stage in this campaign. Guards and prison wardens and so on started being targeted. As part of this kind of sub conflict. How was it? How was it that like particular guards would be selected, or was it just a case of like the ones that you could find out where they live and stuff?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. That would be up to him. Most of the guards were shot by the provisional IRA, and I was never a member of the provisional IRA with any connection with whatsoever, and all when I was inside. But those who were known to have carried out a lot of brutal beatings, and who were in certain tertiary levels of, like for example, in terms of the security and a run every day run of the Hughes block, well, they're going to be all top targets. I mean, Governor Miles, he was executed by the provisional IRA, and I'm quite sure if they would have got Stanley Hilders, they would have executed him too. But no, if it had been possible to do so, but unfortunately, what happened was this whole prison regime became involved. It was right at the very, very forefront, the cutting edge of Thatcherite criminalisation. And they were part and parcel of as much as what they call a regiment of the British Army or any whatever uh, whatever members of the whole Crown Force are all part and parcel of that whole hierarchy of things. So they were targeted, and as for how they were targeted, but I mean, I don't know how operations were carried out. I was sitting in the cell block, but I do know what happened when the word came in, the news came in that another prison officer had been shot dead, or two or three, or blew up, and so on, right? And you can imagine the tension in them blocks, in them wings, and 90%, 99% of the prison, prison sorry, staff at all levels, from governorship, from tertiary level, right down to the very, what they call it, ordinary 5/8 prison officer, they had now found themselves in the very, what they call it, at the very heart of it all. And they will need, a lot of them will need carried out, were paid well to do it. They got big money. A lot of them are British squaddies, as I mentioned before, and it didn't have to be anyway incited to what they call take action against people who they knew or they hated or who were their enemies. Simple.
I see. I see.
Any enemy. Mhm.
I was going to say, Sam Miller, who I haven't interviewed, but I will at some stage. Sam Miller, I saw in another interview he did. He mentions that I'm pretty sure he said that to this day he's still almost on a daily basis will check the obituaries for various for guards, for
The
guards.
wife. Yeah, well, I can understand that because they were so hated and detested and everything else. Now, and what they've done was so cowardly. I mean, how cowardly can you get to beat a man naked in the cell and 3 or 4 screws, suited and booted, and everything else, and all, and a man laying in the cell, maybe in his own excrement or maybe in his own urine, and nothing but a single piece of sponge to lie on, and he's vulnerable. He's in defense. He can't defend himself, and psychologically, he's trying to survive on a day on daily basis. And then he receives this year, and he has to overcome that there, terrible beating, and to be left lying in a cell with maybe a cellmate beside him trying to console him, or maybe the both men in the cell were beaten very, very badly. That was the case, So, I mean, you can imagine all the trauma that is certain. So it has, it's like I compare it to the hate of the people who survived the famine and went over to America and other places to carry with them a deep-seated hatred of everything that was endless, and they carried it with them for generations. And this is only sort of a comparison they can make to how we are affected in that we had been through all that there. We knew what they went through and so much suffering, pain, endurance and commitment, sacrifice and all the rest of it. And yet, you know, how could anybody forget about that there? But they do. They decompartmentalize it they compartmentalize it into um, where they can get on with their own life. It's there. It's way down into the subliminal level, below the level of consciousness, and buried as much as possible on a day and daily basis. But it always resurfaces because no way. It's a. It's like it comes to a service, and it's a bit like old, what do you call it, mines at sea. They suddenly just prop up and they're ready to explode as soon as you hit them. Do you understand? And that there is these are like the memories of the men who went through so much in their dealing, beatings and torture. And they're landmines these years. They don't bury them. They must bury all that trauma or in order to get on with their lives. But the lives never do be the same. They never be normal. We will always be different. The blanket men and all these people and all the men and women, of course. Uh, the women through you can imagine with the women, I can't tell that story, but it's very, very similar to ours. I can't see it how very different except from the biological aspect of it. However, we endured it all, and in many ways, that showed something to our enemies, and that was very, very important. That the people, after the hunger strikes and everything else, and that's it all come to an end. A lot of them screws, uh, but not come into the wings because of what they had done, but not come into the blocks because they're too cowardly to, and everything else and all. And it's only later years that we discovered that quite a few of them had committed suicide. They could not endure. They took their drink, their marriages broke up, their homes broke up. They were involved in different behaviours and everything else. We discovered all this year later as a result of our research. So, like, They were putting themselves to it. They were being made by the British government to put us through it. And it was just a vicious cycle going round. And then when we were beaten, our people outside assassinated, shot, and bombed those who were directly responsible for enforcing that torture and meting out the brutal beatings. A vicious cycle of it round and round.
In theory, I don't have any plans to do this or anything. This is just hypothetical, but okay, a previous guest of mine, Joe Berry, she met with Patrick McGee, who of course planted the bomb that killed her father. Would you be open to like if you found out that some prison officer from back then wanted to do like a meetup thing and talk with the next prisoner? Would that be something you'd entertain? Hypothetically, I'm not asking to do it.
Well, look what has changed. First of all, that has already happened on a number of occasions, and not just with prison officers, but also among ex-prisoners who had formerly who had met up with judges. I think Raymond McCartney, one of the first hunger strikers, met up with a local judge. And you meet all these people because before all this year, these were just like sort of bogey bogeymen who came to do their job. You were put in prison, you were tortured, you were beaten, you were shot, everything else, no, and all you were brought into the courts. But I would, it's like this. We have a lot of resentment and bitterness and so on, and every right to, and so did they, and their families suffered too, and their children, and widows were left and behind as well, and all the rest of it, and as I say, I mean, was their death any worse than any other death? Still, I mean, it's a no-brainer. The people do suffer as a result of what happened, and we had that vicious chain of retaliation, and then followed by the vicious chain of suffering. So if someone came to me, and I have already talked to I've met them here, and I met some of them here in Armagh. They're long out of the force, and I had known them before they were in the prison service. Sorry, and I have talked to them, and I've met them in ordinary everyday circumstances. Talking to one not so long ago there, where I met him at a local mart in Armagh, and he had been in the early days in Armagh jail, and had been in the Crumlin Road, and had been in the Hughes block, and I've met a few others as well. It wasn't. It's hard to understand. One of the prison officers in the jail. I mean, it's an interesting story I never really told. That's. I know his full name. His name, for example, is Billy. He's dead a long time ago. Him and my father were very, very good friends before the troubles, during it, and at any other time. Billy had been a plumber, but later on got into the prison service. Bit of an easier life from an easier money. He's getting older, and so on. But my dad and him still hung about and everything else because my dad wasn't involved in any real politics, and had many Protestant friends, and became very, very good friends visiting each other's homes. However, Billy got a job as a prison officer, and he ended up on the punishment block. Now, this is a man who would have sat in our house and maybe sat along with us at dinner time, whatever we hadn't enough of that, but it was unbelievable. This year, man, he's a Protestant. And he came in to the punishment blocks to visit me and find out what had happened after I got a bad beating. Because simply my father had heard about it and had asked him, could he do anything to try and contact me to see was I okay. And Billy, that's what he done. He wasn't on the shift that I was, what he called in the punishment block, but he changed shifts to come in and see me. And I remember he smuggled me in a bar of chocolate, which was like having a, God, I don't know, Christmas cake. But anyway, I'd never even seen one for years. So, I mean, there was that aspect of the screws who did not want to be part of it, who did not want to be one of the hard men who beat naked men. So, two sides of the story, anything else, no. All I can say is that we should all, at this stage again, make help to make it a lot easier for at least the next generations to shake hands and talk and say what happened in the big accident if we can't do it. But we're going to have to make a start somewhere, and we already have done it. I know I have. I've been out to the battlefields of Flanders, to Messine Park, to Pulkapel, where the youngest Allied soldier from Clonmel, uh, in County Wicklow, is it Clonmel?
Tipperary.
Yeah, Tipperary, sorry. John Condon. I went out there, I believe it or not, Andy Terry was out there with us, and David, who else was there? I can't remember most of them, but I do know that Queen, sorry, the Queen was supposed to be there that year, but me and Mick at least did turn up. And then I went out to Gallipoli, out to the peninsula, to visit the dead, the Nationalist Division's 16th and 10th Divisions, who fought out there in Gallipoli, and to see the other side of it. There's no standing crosses in Gallipoli, all flat.
Okay, so
The point I'm making is that, yes, I think it's time that we all started to buy the hatchet.
okay, interesting. Okay, we'll get into the hunger strike in just a minute. Given that it was organized by a very legendary IRA figure, Brendan Hughes, he's kind of regarded as like the fighter's fighter, the soldier's soldier. What was he like? What was he like as a man? Just before we get into the hunger strike that you were part of.
I'd never known Brendan Hughes in my life until I met him in the Hughes blocks. I have a vague memory of some things happening about we were living in a sort of residential area up around Belfast, the Malone Road or something like that there. But other than that, there I knew from in the first time I was in the compounds, I heard his name. But other than that, I didn't know the man until I met him during the blanket, and that was in a short while. Maybe met him in the at the 1 hour the 1 hour we had out in Mass during Mass. I found him a very affable man. He got on very well. He's congenial enough. You know what I mean? He was also what do you call it, a very dedicated. You know, I think as I stated before, I think he was just altruistic in nature, and it wouldn't surprise me that he was a very left wing socialist. He was very much a committed socialist than he was. He certainly didn't subscribe to the Nationalist Republicans, which we always uh, ascribe to the provincials. But Brandon Hughes had a lot on his shoulder, and he knew it. He had terrible pressure to bring this all to an end. And he was at the very forefront of leading the provisional lie within the Hist blocks against the Thatcherite regime, against the Tory policy of criminalisation at any cost, no matter what happened. We were to be defeated, and Thatcher made that very, very clear. You know, there's so much here I could say about it now, and our first hunger strike was declared on the 10th of October 1980. But the run up to that there was very serious. And it caused a hardening within the Tory government, within the English people in particular, and within Maggie Thatcher, within Maggie Thatcher, both personally and politically. And that is in March 1979. Uri Neve was assassinated. Now, when Uri Neve was assassinated on that morning, the Provisional IRA claimed it. And it wasn't until the afternoon it was clear that they did not carry it out, but it was the INLA who claimed it, and so on. And the INLA, that was a very prestigious job to go right into the very, very heart of Luton, Westminster, and carry that job, and so on. And then that was okay. Then August same year, Mountbatten killed in Sligo. You know, and that there really riled the British establishment, particularly Thatcher and everything else. But she stood and her party and all for the party of the system and so on. You know, so that was a massive blow, and against this background, and retaliation, for example, in June the same year, Miriam Daley assassinated by uh, a collusion of UDA and SAS, and then later in October, Ronnie Bunting and Noah Little assassinated by the Special Air Service, and probably with the help of loyalists, so on. So look, within that short period of time before the hunger strike started, can you just imagine what the atmosphere was like, both inside and outside, and a hardening of attitudes? And you look back and you think, did we have any chance at all, given all this was happening on the outside? However, it was decided that the hunger strike would start on the 27th. There'd be 7 men going on the hunger strikes from blocks 3, 4, and 5, and that the hunger strike would obviously be the start of a whole sequence. As we know later, men joined the hunger strike. Later, something like 27 men joined that hunger strike before it ended. The women in Armagh jail joined around about the 1st of December. And then, believe it or not, for a short period of time, 6 UDA largest prisoners joined the hunger strike around about the 10th or 11th of December, demanding in particular that they be segregated from Republican prisoners. But that was very opportunistic, so it was, and that no one testing of Dan and all. And I don't know if that was uh, a, a, an effort to get unionist politicians to put the pressure on the Tory government. And there's a lot of controversy about that there, because Ian Paisley sort of uh, Sydney took over the UDA from Monty Terry and made representation to UDA, or on behalf of UDA, to the British government, and demanding meetings and demanding that their things be met. Jerry Fitt, on the other hand, called on Jerry Fitt, so-called Narcissus MP, SDLP, called on the British government not to give in. That to give in would be to pull the trigger. To give in would be to detonate the bomb. And that these people do not deserve it. If the British government had given to them, then they would. This would only lead to further belief that violence could achieve whatever it wanted. Or violence could be achieved by, but they could, aims and objectives could be achieved by through violence, to use of force, through armed struggle.
Gotcha. Can you talk to me about the process that your body and mind went through over your time spent on the hunger strike? How long was it again? Remind us.
Right, the hunger strike started on the 27th of October and finished on the 18th of December after 53 days. And by that time, there was quite a few people on the hunger strike. This was in carried momentum to being Arsenal, and we done everything we could to avoid hunger strike. It was the last resort, the very last, what they call a mechanism that we could use in our limited arsenal, and that was our bodies, And when the hunger strike was announced, 7 of us on it, and this is all new territory. There had been no hunger strikes within the blocks throughout all them years of protesting and being asked, and so on. And it brought us into new territory. Here we were engaging with the British government, right? At the very interface of things here, we were now challenged, saying we demand our simple, basic 5 demands. And they were very, very basic demands: to have right to free association, to have our own clothes, to have no visits, regular visits, meal, and all different types of things, which could have been well accommodated within the prison regime. But this was now a political thing. This was us fighting the criminalisation of what they called the British government. And we felt we were throwing ourselves against the whole British imperial arsenal, and they were throwing it back at us. And that's how it felt at times. And we knew we had to be steadfast and we had to endure. And that's what we did endure. And the first, the hunger strikes, I mean, we were all young, a lot to live for. and maybe one of us. And you can imagine the ideal facing for that Christmas in 1980. And as the days went by, you went through all the emaciating period, and every day your checked, your weight was checked every other day, and blood samples taken every other week. Your you had salt and water, fresh water and salt, and that's what you drank. You drank the salt water and the fresh water too, and so on. And you had also at that time a cellmate in the cell with you who had to endure the fact that you were starving while he had to continue on eating. And all that there carried on for a while, and you know we're trying to keep up and top up. Hopefully, that something would emerge to bring this all to an end. But even then, there was no sense of an ending, and we knew it. So time went by, and became emaciated, and it all went down to your own biomass, your own biology, and how much you can endure. For example, Sean McKenna, he was only maybe about 10 stone, dropped uh, in weight unbelievably. That he looked like a wraith even after about 3 to 4 weeks. That's how bad it was, and his skin pale. The other thing you had to realize, people is terrible. I remember one of the things I always remember is the odor or smell that came off your body, the decay. Right? Because you had to sleep under a blanket. It's bad enough sleeping in a cell full of excrement covered everywhere and piss, and rotten food everywhere. But it was nothing as bad as I thought. The smell of a decaying body. Yours, when you had to go under the blankets to try and get a bit of sleep. I tried to get to sleep because sleep was soon eluding a lot of us. However, we endured more and we were removed from the blocks to H3, which was a makeshift hospital wing where we could be monitored more closely by the prison medical authorities, and also to make sure we're being treated well and so on. And thus we had beds and stuff like that in this time down in H3, and we're allowed to go out and to communicate and talk in what was called the kitchen, a part of the what they call the each wing, which is sectioned off. However, we done all that there, and time again went by, and you got weaker and weaker, and the body actually eats itself, and it chooses what is weakest. It starts with the nutriments and the fats, and then it gets down into uh, the vital organs. And it's a whole process of selection. Well, I don't know whether it's a process of natural selection, but the body has its way of surviving, and it determines what is the weakest part, within it. And then the body actually eats itself. And this is what's happening. It's just not about losing weight and all the nutriments. You can really feel it. You know. However, and this is how we all wars went on. Negotiations taking place, talks here, rumors about this and rumors about that, and possible resolution. And I don't know. Everything being heard was to give us hope, and prison chaplains would be in regular to us. Prison chaplain Father Murphy, he was a Jesuit priest, taught in Armagh College, St. Patrick's College in Armagh, and Father Tom Toner. He was a redemptorist priest, and he was of course, the prison chaplain as well. And of course, within the chaplaincies, the H blocks had a special status.
Can you so obviously, and the 53 days on hunger strike, and before that you were already on a very much like a reduced starvation diet. Because of all those years, did it take a long time for your relationship with food and your relationship to eating Did that well, or if
Well, what I'll just bring it to is towards the end of that hunger strike, because a lot more followed, and a lot more which was unforeseen, unforetold, and incredibly exactly what had followed our hunger strike. And no, and we were given this document, and it was a very sort of what they call it, laid out document in terms of what was on offer to us and everything else. Now that whole still a controversy all about what the document, but we believe something that we had enough to call the hunger strike off. Which Brandon Hughes told the hunger strike when he seen the full complement of the document and had time to study it along with Fa Toner and uh, for John Murphy, and with others, of course, in the early hours of morning to try to save Sean McKenna, who'd been now removed from the prison hospital, the actual prison hospital, to Musgrave Park Military Wing, and was now just slipping into a coma, and actually had went into a coma before when he reached the hospital. And you're talking about 11th hour stuff, 11th minute stuff, at the very end, and decisions had to be made, had to be enough. I didn't get to see the document at that time, but I knew the basis and of what it was. And as far as I was concerned, whatever decision Brandon Hughes and everybody took, and I was happy with. No other choice, because we had something to work with. We could save lives, and we could save a lot of confrontation and bring all these 4.5, 5 years of suffering to an end, and so on. So there's a lot of things on the table at that time, and eventually, we got the document. But I mean, it's not fully the British government. You can't blame the British government fully for not implementing all of us in that document, because it's very important to know that the prison regime, especially the prison administration, and those at what's called tertiary level, higher levels, assistant governors, and of course what's called the principal officers and screws, were determined that we would not get out of our cells, and were determined to make sure that the agreement or the resolution would not uh, would not occur, would not happen, and they messed up from start to finish. What type of clothes we get in, they kept changing what type of clothes we could wear. It was going to be civilian clothes. They were going to tape it, and it went on and on and on until eventually in December, and 2 or 3 experiments was tried with Bobby Sands meeting with Stanley Hilditch. And it worked out as sort of what they call a possible uh, resolution, in that the force would be put back in again. Boys would start to conform and everything else and so on. But it did not stop. It went on, and next thing, everything that was on offer was just sent down, just totally and utterly. It was the prison regime, as far as I'm concerned, ultimately, who would not implement anything. They were too afraid. They had done so much damage to men, and they knew what them men were capable of when they did come out of their cells. And this is what they had to face, a lot of them. So that could be another reason. However, what happened was the second hunger strike, and I think maybe if I tailed off on that point there, on this one again, because I'm getting tired. It's tired talking about this.
No, you're grand. God, I can only imagine how bloody emotionally
Also
draining.
traumatic talking about, because it evokes and in memory and revoke, you know what I mean? Like, it evokes a lot of memories, a lot of nostalgia there, and for someone who's been there and watched, knew all them hunger strikers, knew all the men who suffered and still do, and went through it all myself and knew what went through. I would be more emotionally attached to telling the story than anybody could do or write about it. Do you understand? And it does, it sort of empties you. You're telling it all again. And sometimes in the telling and retelling, you add on new bits which you forgot about, or you maybe read about later. I got confirmed about later. You know what I mean? And it seems to be like a never-ending story.
I get you, completely understand. Okay, so we've come to like the end of the hunger strike that you want. Do you want to then at a future date just talk about your life post hunger strike, and that would be like the end
Yeah,
of it?
yeah, we'll do that there, because I want the people, you need people to understand who are maybe the listener, and it's very hard to convey, especially on a radio or anything else, just by talking and try to convey to people, and I could use different type of films, like, to illustrate how people were treated in the jails, you know what I mean, and so on. But the His block was unique throughout the whole world, and this was something that changed everything and brought us to exactly where we are today in the changing of the political and cultural landscape that is at we now live in now. The current status quo, my God, how has it not changed?
I get you. Can I just have one final little thing to wrap it up? Do you remember how it felt to finally eat that first meal after the 53 days?
Yeah. We were given what do you call it, very, very stewed down, what do you call it, scrambled egg, okay, water, good clear water. I can remember mostly, but we're given tablets for starters, right? And for depression, we called them black bombers. They call them out too. And then we were given these here very specialist type injections. There was no meat left on us. You can imagine what were left. People down to 60. I mean, it is said that Bobby Sands went down from 155 kilograms or pounds to something like 70 or 80, whatever it was. And Sean McKenna, can you imagine there's no meat left in your body? The only place they can put an injection in is your butt, where there is something. And that's where we all got these injections. And they were painful, but they were essential for us to survive. Because you've heard us say it, people in the concentration camps, the Nazi concentration camps, and after they had been liberated, that many of them died because they ate food, and they had been starving, they had been emaciated, and so on, and so many of them died as a result of thinking you could just go back into eating food in any normal way, but that wasn't the case. And that was the cause of a big thing. So with us, we had a different approach from the medical authorities, who were sort of directed by a doctor called Love, Dr. Love, Queen's University, who was one of the top nutritionists in the world, and who had monitored the whole hunger strike, kept all the records and everything else, all the data, and so on, so that could be used in a more powerful way to help people suffering malnutrition, starvation out in third world countries.
So as I just said to you before we started recording, we ended our last piece of interview basically at the very beginning of the hunger strike, of your hunger strike, the first one. We spoke in great detail about the blanket protest and the
Yes.
wash and kind of everything that came along with that. So yeah, I was going to say, remind us when it was that your hunger strike started, and kind of what led up to you being a part of it.
Well, the hunger strike, first and foremost, was the last resort that we wanted. We would try everything to avoid hunger strike. I've already detailed all the different phases of what they call the present struggle and the Hughes block struggle. However, when the hunger strike came, it started on October 27th, and Sadness took part in that there. And there was 6 members of the provisional IRA and a member of the INLA. That was me, and the hunger strike was more or less led by Bratton, the Dark Hughes, and so on. But our demands at that time were very simple. They were well laid out, still be to our own clothes, free association, and very, very simple demands: our right to segregation, not to do prison work, and so on, and we had already received an indication from I think it was Atkins at the time, Humphrey Atkins, when before the hunger strike started, he conceded to the close issue. It was still contentious, but at least it was the first conciliatory move, the only one, by the British to allow us to wear our own clothes and so on. That was before the hunger strike started. However, as the hunger strike progressed, a lot of things were happening on the landscape, both within the prison and outside as well, on the political landscape, and as well as what was happening with on the streets, so to say. It was a very precarious situation. It was electric, as someone once said to me. However, the days passed on the hunger strike, and we came to December 18th. Sean McKenna was very, very bad this time and had been moved to Musgrave Park Multi-Wing as he was slipping in and out of a coma and didn't think he would make it. And a document was produced in the 11th hour, which had come from Westminster and had been brought over to the hunger strikers by some sort of secret liaison. The document produced, I didn't see it until the 18th, and this document was crucial to a decision to end the hunger strike, save the lives of Sean McKenna and everybody. However, interpretation of the document was that, and it was just down to the implementation of these concessions, and this would become the crux issue. And after the hunger strike ended, it was just a lot of negotiations taking place with the men who were still up on the Hughes blocks, tactically in protest, but not active protest as such, like this with leadership of the provisionals as to how to get this, and with the prison regime, sorry, how to implement these new concessions and so on. And I always believed this day that there was no way that the prison regime was going to be in any way helpful or assist or support the implementation of any concessions, especially what they call the close issue. It's a big thing. You had to remember those loyalist prisoners and all the other what's called ODCs, ordinary decent criminals. It's a bit of a what they call paradox there, but anyway, they were wearing the prison clothes. They were wearing what we call the monkey suit, the grey, heavy linen suit. And for all intents and purposes, no matter what they done with it and how they put it on and how they were still wearing the prison garb and conforming to prison rules and regulations and so on. You know, and there were a certain amount of loyalists on protest too. In fact, around about the 12th of December, around about that there, I think about a dozen loyalists joined the protest, more or less to add momentum. But they never any intention of dying. But the thing about it was the issue of clothes, get back to this, was important, and how the prison regime are going to deal with this matter. And they certainly weren't forthcoming in any way. And they put obstacles and everything in the way that would, in fact, they seem to be orchestrating a scenario whereby there would be no concessions being implemented, and knowing full well that this could lead to another hunger strike, and inevitably, this is what happened. You know, the failure of the prison regime and the British government to implement the concessions and to introduce a peaceful resolution to the entire situation, both inside the jail and outside the jail.
Can I ask you, how did like the selection or volunteering kind of process to pick these these few hunger strikers. How did this come about?
Well, I don't know how the provisionals selected theirs, but obviously the INLA have been involved in the protests from the outset and were very much involved on a lot of activities on the outside. For example, Miriam Daly and Ronnie Bunting, very much involved in the relative actions. But the INLA decided that they would also embark on a hunger strike along with the professionals. So it was agreed that 7 would start, 6 professionals, 1 INLA.
Okay, I see. I'd be correct in saying that for the duration of your hunger strike, you still had a cellmate, but the cellmate wasn't on hunger strike too, right?
No, you were brought down to the prison hospital eventually, and everybody was given their own thing. You know what I mean? Given their own
After
setting. No, yeah.
how long did it take for you to be brought out of your cell once you started hunger strike?
Well, I don't know. I can't remember weeks. You know, before the history, and then eventually to with a makeshift hospital.
So when you went into this, like we'll say day one, like when you look back on yourself, then had you kind of any idea what you were really in for in terms of how it would feel and what it would do to you, this hunger strike?
Yeah, you certainly did, and you'd hope that it would achieve its objective and everything else, and bring an end to a lot of suffering, not just your own on the hunger strike, but to all the protesters, the blanket men had endured. And if the objective was to bring this all here to an end, because it had been done now for years, and we were into a position, a situation whereby we'd done everything to avoid hunger strike. But as I said, it did happen, and I already knew that I was at a disadvantage myself, and it because I had been shot and had lost quite a bit of my intestines, my bowel and stuff like that there. So, but I was only 24 years of age, just turned 24, in fact, and you had to realize what you're embarking on and what you're taking on, and you never know from one day to another as to, after a certain period of time, as what complications would kick in as a result of your body condition, things that you've suffered in the past. So it was daunting. You were afraid. You were determined as well, and you trying to balance it all against what was to be achieved, never thinking of about it would fail and so on. But as I say, you just had to endure.
I'm gonna say, okay, so for
Can you
anyone,
hear that?
yeah, it's great. For anyone who might not be so familiar with Irish history and kind of Irish republicanism history, hunger strike is there's like a historical um there's a historical
Connection, sure.
tradition to it, and most notably probably Terence McSweeney, from Cork, who died of hunger strike in Brixton prison. Did you see yourself as like part of like this kind of linear Republican tradition, carrying on something that was done decades before?
Well, obviously, the tradition of hunger strike is very synonymous with Irish republicanism. I think we're the only nation in the whole world on the planet, I think I said before, that actually embark on a mass hunger strike. And if we're talking about in a modern day society with 12 million, 10 million and many others, tradition here in Ireland, I've never known of any other group or community or people taking who died on the hunger strike, certainly no loyalists or unionists and so on. It's a Republican thing. We carried that on, yes, no doubt about that.
I spoke when I was speaking to Seamus Kearney before, he was saying that he didn't really think the loyalists and the unionists kind of had like the conviction and the kind of commitment to take a hunger strike through to the end. He kind of said it was all like kind of toothless threats in terms of what they were saying about.
That's what, yep, and he was right. And as I say, it was only in the last 6 days before the hunger strike ended that the loyalists, the loyalist printers were never represented by actually the DUP, except when it was opportunistic to do so. But they were just totally disregarded and neglected and ignored by the what they called unionist establishment, and that's right across the board. And when they announced the hunger strike, I can't remember, maybe 8 or 10 of them, what I called Billy Mullen, stated clearly that they were joining the hunger strike. They had no intention of dying, but they wanted to be given recognition that they were a separate group, but they also wanted segregation and that they were political prisoners and everything else, and all right, and so on. And, and at this particular period, the hunger strike we didn't know how long we were going to go, but it's coming to an end. But about when it was going to come out, nobody knew the outcome at all. However, the loyalists did get representation, but Ian Paisley jumped in on the scenario and capitalised by saying that he was speaking on behalf of the UDA and that these prisoners' demands should be met and everything else and all right. Not Republican prisoners, only loyalist prisoners, which was suited anyway. And there was a big conflagration at that time between the UDA and the DUP as to who represented who. And their spokesman was Andy Terry at the time, as well as others, maybe Jim Craig, maybe still alive or dead at that time. But whatever it was, so you can see they were never really accepted, acknowledged, or in any way within their own communities. And they'll be the first to tell you out there, but especially by the unionist political establishment, they were totally ignored until an opportunity arose and emotional issues arose, and that was it. So there's never been a hunger strike in that tradition, but unfortunately our own, and I say unfortunately in the sense that sometimes, there are aspects of history become spectres of history. And one of them is a sacrifice, total sacrifice, via the tradition of hunger strikes. I mean, you've no way to defend yourself. You're using your body as a weapon. There's no other way. And your mind, of course. This is a big factor and so on, And it's one of them was like Sweeney or Thomas Arsh or all the other hunger strikers since then who died. They all had to cross that threshold in the end. And a lot of their lives were dependent not just simply on any decision of their own, but on what was happening related to the political situation. And this was the difficulty. The British government at this time under Maggie Thatcher were determined to not give in, give any concessions. To think about it, they had lost their Nave, the Tories, and in the same year, I think Mountbatten, and that was a big kick onto the British establishment, Mountbatten, and to the British political establishment via our Nave. So this was a scenario that it's a catch-22 situation. We wanted to pursue to the end, to the death, and the Thatcher government were not willing to concede anything whatsoever, even though it was a political, how would you say it, disaster waiting to happen. And in fact, right up there, I don't know how many people outside those walls were killed with bottom rounds and rubber bullets and beatings.
Yeah. From what you remember anyway, you ended up being on hunger strike for 53 days. Can you talk me through the various kind of like stages of it, if you will? Like the first couple of weeks of no food, and how did the second third of it was say feel in relation to the first and the last?
It's difficult for the first time, the first week or so. I mean, your whole stomach is collapsing, and what is happening is, for example, your bowels are starting to close up. You get a lot of headaches too throughout the whole day. So and insomnia kicks in. You just can't sleep as well, but you can still feel and hear your body, your stomach, uh, shrinking. It's like you can imagine it's like for 2 or 3 days food. You soon hear your stomach, won't you? Isn't that right? You can imagine after 2 weeks and then so on. But then as days go by, you only have water and salt as the days go, but as the days go by, your body becomes adjusted. And I think there's a whole process involved there. It's really a process for what I had learned is the body kicks into instinctive survival, and starts to really eat itself. It starts off with all the sort of excess fat, and having used up all that, it starts to eat away at the nutrients in the muscles. And it goes through this whole process of selection. And as far as I know, up until it comes to the vital organs, and this is where the body itself, well, I don't know how it's done. Maybe for example, you could have had one of the hunger strikers who would die at 46 years of age, and that's because the body had found that sort of weak uh, vital organ. So uh, this is what happens to the whole body, and you become decimated, but you're still mentally alert in every way. So you are. You can still move about. You can still sleep late. Sleep is very intermittent during the day and night, and all this whole process is going on, and you're trying to maintain some sort of interest in the world around you, the ongoing world, the living world around you, and accepting the fact to come to terms with and accept the fact that it's a very big possibility that you could be dead before Christmas. And then that has been endured. I had to remember the, the hospital regime, or the prison doctor and his team are carrying out tests on you, urine tests and stuff like that there, and blood and you name it. And at the same time, you're trying to uh, focus on what you set out to achieve. And at the same time, your whole body and mind is rebelling against this sort of this destruction. And the body kicks into then survival mode in every way possible. I mean, I can't outline it, but that's how it goes.
Like at various stages during the strike, were you convinced in your own head that you would have to see this thing through, and that you would end up dying from
Oh,
it?
all of us were. All of us were very, very committed. We all hoped and prayed that, but never have to do it, that this all could be resolved. And we firmly believe that a resolution could be found. We were very conscious of our, not just our commitment, but our obligation and our duty to others who had supported us both inside and outside, to all our fellow blanket men. There's a lot of pressure on you in that way too, and as well as your own uh, belief, your own, how would you say it, clear instinct to, what do you call it, to survive. It's a natural born instinct to survive and so on. And it's also, what do you call it, you're driven on by so many factors of history, and driven on by so much pain and suffering and torture you really had endured for years, 24-hour lockup, dirt protests, shite protests, you name it, everything else was all part of the no wash protest. So what we were concerned about was what was happening outside, what was happening behind the scenes, what movement are we making, who's doing negotiations, and so on. Man, we got news filtering in all the time that a lot of things were happening. We had been moved by this time to the prison hospital, and there was all sorts of um, clandestine meetings behind the scenes and all sorts of stuff. Michael Allison came in, and he was sent in by Humphrey Atkins, I think, who refused to meet the prisoners, both loyalist and Republican. And Allison tried to show everybody that things weren't just as bad as I think, and there could be a resolution. And he was optimistic, and he was sort of positive and upbeat about things and all. And I don't know about his purpose or anything, but that's what it was. That's how he came across. And we have bear in mind that Sean McKenna was at this time really knocking on death's door in a big way, So that was it, and eventually the whole momentum gathered up in the last week or so of the hunger strike, and various things were happening, negotiating, which I was not privy to at the time. And next thing we know was a document is being produced. It's very important and so on. And I never seen the full document, but I was given the gist of it, and that it could lead to a resolution and end of the hunger strike, save lives inside and outside, and avoid what do you call it? Well, it'd be hard to say what it was, but it had brought things to the very brink in the north, all over the hunger strike and the use of the hunger strike that Christmas. It could have been a hell of a lot worse. But the hunger strike did come to an end on the 18th, and he believed it was only a matter of time before whatever had been gained would be successfully implemented, but this was not to be. And eventually it led to a second hunger strike. And then on that hunger strike, of course, Bobby Sands died after 66 days. And it was just pitiful and cruel that we had to go through it all. The prison regime and the British government were determined by adopting an attitude to the prisoners whereby, look, we'll give you your main demands, the clothes and association, whatever it is. We can easily negotiate, but they didn't. They took a hard line attitude, and that was because of Thatcher. So if we found ourselves in that situation, it was terrible. And then the next hunger strike started, and people were sort of, I remember the feeling throughout the blocks when it was announced going to be no hunger strike. And, there was an air of silence, poignant silence throughout each wing in each block. And, we knew damn rightly that this was going to be it.
How were you treated by like the prison, I guess the prison staff and more specifically prison medical staff during this? Was there, I don't know, was there some bit of kind of sympathy or compassion from them? Did they just kind of treat you sort of like dispassionately, objectively? Was there a sense you got off them that they thought you were like brave or admirable or just stupid or anything, any kind of sense you got from them?
Oh. Well, yes. I mean, the prison staff at that time was, I mean, 90% unionist. That was the staff of the prison. 90, maybe more. they all come from unionist backgrounds, so we expect that there. But you, when you take men who are down on a hunger strike, it's not a time to manhandle them and to beat them and everything else. They've gone so far. But we did find animosity. We did find also a sympathy, and how would you say it? Certainly not in support of our demands or anything like that there, but basic human sympathy, and that people were suffering and and those who were watching on and were part of it were also getting on with their lives. A novel comparison to seeing what's out there happening. However, the screws didn't beat any of us, and there was a, what do you call it, I suppose you could say, an unwritten code that you just do not beat men who are down on a hunger strike or torture them and so on. And prison doctor Davy, what was Davy's name? Can't remember Davy's name, his second name. I know he was a prison doctor at the time. He committed suicide after some years after the second hunger strike. He was very much involved in the whole thing and very emotionally affected, even traumatized by both hunger strikes. Being a doctor, his whole aim is to preserve life and maintain it and do everything to save life. But here it was an anomaly for the whole thing, because men had decided in their minds, their heads, to die on a hunger strike, and he couldn't do nothing about that there. It's beyond him. However, he was fairly good, and he went through and endured quite a lot. There's no doubt about that. And eventually, Brenton Hughes actually described him as the 11th hunger striker.
God, okay. Can you take me to like the day or the moment when it was called off, when you found out that you were no longer on hunger strike, that it was over? 53 days.
Yes, we all had done 53 days, and it was a crisis situation whereby we had this document. We had a potential to resolve this year without any further suffering or death, not just the hunger strike, but the whole prison issue and so on. And what was contained in the document was a recipe, a sort of everybody get out with their, to get out of this equation, and at the same time not lose face. And I didn't even know anything about it, the document, in the sense that it didn't say it, we just told the gist of it. But it didn't matter. The problem was that Sean McCann was in a coma, and he was about to die. In fact, the prison chaplain at that time, Father John Murphy, actually told me later that Sean McCann has been away. Whatever he meant by that, and I'd come back. So the problem was, but here was an ideal situation to save a lot of lives, and we had a promise. We already had the main concession granted to us. The hunger strike was called off. Brandon Hughes. When I heard that the hunger strike was called off, as much relieved as anybody, because I do believe that a resolution to the whole thing was now possible, and a lot of pain, suffering, and a lot of sacrifice, and both inside and outside the jail, was all going to come to an end, and so on. And that was the most peaceful end. And it did for a short while, until the next hunger strike.
I was gonna say, like the fact that the hunger strike ended without the demands getting met. Did you see that as like somewhat of a loss, as opposed to a win from the whole thing?
We believed at that time firmly, and as the days, moved on after the 18th of Christmas came, and a lot of negotiations and talks were going on between Hilditch Bobby Sands at his Hilders was the #1 governor. I can't remember his first name, but and I only read about this many years after about exactly what was happening because I wasn't privy to any of it whatsoever. We were now back in the wings. The 7 Hunger Strike are back in the wings again, but back in but the protest rings. And myself and Brendan Hughes were in one cell. I don't know who even where the others were put into the. Most of us were turned to H5, uh, to A wing once we came out of, and we watched, and we hoped at the time that everything was always going to pan out fine. It was going to work in our favor. Everybody could see it was important to avoid us, but Thatcher and intransigence, in particular, the in particular Thatcher and our cohorts like Humphrey Atkins or whoever else was there, they just were determined that they were going to do nothing to avoid a hunger strike. They didn't care. And I do believe that if the Sanders had died, another 7 would have took their place and they would have died. And then that would be followed again by more taking their place. And I would have went on because I do not know how many men would have been prepared to die. We don't know what the scenario was, but we do know one thing, that the Thatcherite government was prepared to let as many die as possible. It wouldn't have mattered one iota how many died or how they died and so on. So that was the situation, that was the scenario at that time. And here we are faced with the possibility of the whole deal breaking down, being hijacked and being sabotaged by elements within the actual prison regime, Case Block prison regime itself, who determined to be no concessions given, that everything was given would be thwarted through one mechanism, through administrative red tape and through everything else. It threw everything in the way to ensure that whatever agreement, whether secret or not, was not going to be implemented within the blocks. And that corralled everybody into a situation. And next thing was all the negotiations broke down. There was different experiments by bringing in furniture, see how it worked and everything else. And all boys did get their own clothes to some degree. That was the type of nature of your own clothes was sensitive, but it went on. But eventually it all broke down. And ultimately the prison regime and those who upheld it are responsible as much as the Tory government intransigence. Okay.
Okay, so when the hunger strike does end and you go back to a normal cell, did you go back to like being on a no wash and a blanket protest? Was it back to that?
Oh yeah, we went back on the protest again. We went back to the protest blocks as they were known because there had been no solution fully. There had not been fully resolved. There had been no real changes except that furniture had been put back into the cells. Boys were given clothes and civilian type clothes, which were, I mean, you're talking about an anachronism. I think these clothes may have been in the prison system for about the 1960s. But anyway, it didn't matter. We could see that every effort was being thwarted by the prison authorities, particularly the screws who carried out a lot of beatings, particularly those tertiary levels who organised all that there. So let's be honest about this here. They had a lot to fear from the men who would be coming out into the wings and who would now control the wings. There's only about 300 men, maybe. That's just black men. Then there was many, many more within the blocks, positioned throughout the blocks. It would have been quite easy for Republican prisoners to take over all that prison if they wanted to, and so on, and they knew that there, and they knew there would be trouble.
In fact, when the hunger strike, the second hunger strike, came to an end, many of the perpetrators who were involved in all this brutality, psychological torture, and all that whole array of repression, they left and went to other blocks. And the other screws who were not involved, the career screws, it was a fair comment, and it made the comment and said, but now we know who was doing the beatings, now we know who was keeping the men awake, now we know who was stopping and slapping them and torturing them, because they had left once it was all over, and men were coming out, and there was a lot of hate there, for a lot of hate, deep black hatred, So again, and the schools have suffered, and as we know that now, even some years after that, there are some of those schools who were highly involved in beating out terrible, brutal beatings, who had orchestrated it, were executed by the Provisional IRA. That's long after the hunger strikes. So you can see the animosity. I'm only just stating that there to convey to you the animosity that men had. And they had to play the game, and they had to be diplomatic, and so on. That's the way it was. But the hunger strike, second hunger strike, could not be avoided. Bobby Sands had made a decision. It's going to be another hunger strike, and that's another issue. Maybe just for another day. I'm hoarse. Bit
Uh,
hoarse. I've got a bit of cold on me.
you're grand. You're grand. Okay, no problem. Yeah, in that case, we can talk about we can talk about
The second hunger strike and what happened
exactly
after.
what it must have been like for you as a former hunger strike, observing that, and of course, your life after prison. Remind us there, when did you finally end up leaving prison for good?
January 1986. I should have been out on Friday, sorry, that Christmas, but I was put on the charge only 2 weeks before by an ex-squatty who was a prison officer, and he was determined I was not going to get out for that Christmas, my first Christmas in 12 years. And he put me on the charge, it meant I was sent to the boards. So I postponed my release for 2 weeks.
I see. Okay, so maybe next time we can I can also ask you about
I can talk to you about the plans the terrible plans that the boys had. But this time in 1986, 87, there was no prisoners groups, there was no counselling, there was no facilities or services available whereby men who had spent long times in prison and endured so much, there was nothing there to give them support or help in terms of mental or psychological, and given it everything they went through. That all came later. But for myself and many of us who had been raised around that period, well, you were just threw out onto the street, more or less outside the prison gates, and all you had was two brown prison bags with all your whole belongings in this world. And you looked and you heard the gate banging behind you, and there you were facing reality and no real help from anybody. You didn't think at that time you needed help, but it all became manifest in later years. So maybe I'll talk about that next time.
of course, and even what it must have been like being in prison while the '83 escape happened, the biggest prison escape ever.
Yes, I was very much involved in that there, and it was a first mass escape. Okay, they didn't all get away, but it reminds me of the joy and the exhilaration we had when we planned the first ever successful mass escape, the INLA. And we'd only been formed, and that was we got 10 men out. We could have got 20 men out, but that's a story there in itself for another day. Because before that escape and 10 men got out, I was involved in that escape. I was on the escape committee as well as down digging day and night and everything. It was just it's a miracle how it all jailed together in the end and got the men out. However, before that, we already got another 5 men out at Chichester Street, Magistrates Court. And we were only formed at that time a few months. So maybe to go back to that particular thing again with the INLA, whose 50th anniversary is
Interesting.
this.
I was gonna say this December, it was like late
It's December. Well,
It's
look,
like
the INLA was it was actually within the jail in December, within the prison, the INLA was formed. Just and we had to fight to get our own compound, our own cage, our own recognition as a distinct group and so on. And we had trouble, but unfortunately, with some of our former comrades. So there's a lot of politics going on. There's an undercurrent of things you maybe want to look at. However, I certainly just like to finish off the hunger strike any odd time. And if you wish, we'll talk about how the INLA formed within the prison, what they had to go through, their successes, their losses, and the fact of how did, for example, 10 hunger strikers, out of 10 hunger strikers, 3 of them men, almost a third, were from the INLA, who at that time had quota of about 45 to 50 members on the on protest. And sometimes we only had about maybe 30, 35. But when you have 300 people on the protest, you wonder how a small organization is so highly represented on the death list of hunger strikers. So maybe that's something you can delve into sometime.
Sure, absolutely.
And understand. Okay.
We'll speak again in like a week or two. Yeah, we'll wrap it up then.
Okay. Thanks very much. I'm racked. Okay.
Oh, you're grand, boy. You're grand. Let
Yeah,
me go.
I'd like to talk about the release plate. No, how release was. No, you had to realize how right by come the ceasefires and all, hundreds of men were back in the haste blocks, and some of them, and I seen it myself, were back in again for the third time. They were such idealists, they believed, and they were such committed and so on. But they were sometimes you seen the same men coming back in for the third time, in that whole period. But men got out like myself after all that there. We had a terrible time settling down, and there was no services or help or counselling anytime available then. Men were just given their brown bags and full of clothes and literally put out onto outside the jail, at the gates of the jail. And some of these men been there for maybe 14, 15 years. They hadn't even seen the car. Can you imagine what it's like to try and cross the road because you couldn't gauge speed? And a lot of things had changed when men go out. Maybe men that come in wide and come back in again, and their children were grown up. Their families were moved on, and their position within the family unit as fathers, whatever it is, totally maybe different. They had to make their own connections, but there was no help whatsoever. And you went sort of haywire, and a lot of boys took their drinking and get away from it. Other boys just cut their ties. Other boys, many of them continued on in another way, politely, are promoting cultural aspects of the struggle and so on. Became engaged in different ways other than the use of violence. But for men who went out there, they found themselves out in a vastly changed world. And remember, it wasn't, in many cases, the conflict was still going on. It wasn't until after the 98 ceasefires that the prisoners groups got organised and obtained funding through the peace process, that all these here different prisoner groups, loyalists, Republican else, and whoever else, got some help. But for us, coming out with no help whatsoever, and you find yourself sliding back into ways and means that help you to forget the trauma. And for some boys, like they talk to, I say, drink, maybe even later used to some drugs and so on, and we had people that died and their marriages broke up, and other people, their relationships broke up, and they had to renew everything. And there was a complete another, how would you call it, schism. There was a lot of things had to be reconnected on the level of families, communities, men going back into the system and becoming involved again, or deciding not to get involved, and maybe clearing out, getting away down south somewhere, or maybe just focusing on starting a business. But for the majority of us, no help whatsoever available. Just this raw, how would you call it, re-engage. We had to reconnect with everything to back into society and to make that transition back into it in many ways. And it was very, very difficult for us, for all of us.
Sorry to stop you. Remind us what year did your second prison term, the one you're talking about getting out now?
I was released in January. I was supposed to be released in December 1985. But
Okay, gotcha.
just before Christmas, I was put on a charge and therefore wasn't released until January, which meant I had spent 11 Christmases in jail, like most of the men. But when I came out in 1986, and that January in 86, it was unbelievable. We were back to square one. We couldn't get any employment. We had to be reintegrated. Well, we found out we had to reintegrate ourselves in some way to be able to assimilate. And, there was so much a change we couldn't take in, all the vast things that we had to adapt and amend to. And there was, again, as I say, no help whatsoever, just throughout on the streets. And a lot of boys died early. They had early deaths. They didn't last. Took the drink, alcohol, and all that stuff.
I'm sorry. Were you still like when you were like about to leave prison and stuff? Did you plan on returning to paramilitary activity like as soon as you went out? Did you have a mindset shift?
Well, at that stage again, I spent 9.5 years, 10, almost 12 years in jail, right? And time is moving on. You're 30, and there's always the lure of going back into being involved in the conflict, the armed struggle, and so on. It's always there. The connections are always there. You had what they call everybody that you would have met has been either in jail, interned, and so on, or their families, and they had really, how do you say, suffered a lot. There's still the same harassment. There's still the same intimidation. There's still the same regime in existence. Very little had changed at that time, and the British had a grip on just about everything at that time. But for people like myself coming out and having witnessed men coming in for the third time, no, we didn't want to go out. We became involved in more political activities, more community development orientated type stuff. Other boys did go back, and other boys never left, because when you leave the jail and you're still a member of that organisation, then it's still the same status as when you're back out on the streets. For some men, they reported back. For many men, they reported back. But as to whether they were given roles in the armed struggle, I don't know. You understand? But whether they opted for it there, and a lot of men did. And unfortunately, some of them boys ended back inside again for the third time. But you had to go out, you had to face all this discrimination. You might have educated yourself in the jail, both formally and personally, but that didn't get you a job. And in some cases, local employers, whether nurses or whatever, were afraid to employ you because they were a potential target for lawlessness, and therefore their staff and anybody else employed by them they were potential targets as well. So it was this fear factor was all in, and so on. So you find it really hard. You took whatever work you could get. And we done everything we could do. We cleaned carpets, I did anyway, and other boys done this, that, and the other. Whatever work was available, some boys done bouncer, other boys done came involved in sort of schemes that lasted only about a year, 2 years, but it gave them that sort of stability and so on. But there was nothing there, and there was just no help coming from anywhere. And boys just had to, having endured so much, there was something very tragic about that too, in that you you weren't going out there to get your medals presented to you. You were out on the street, literally, and there was nothing there. It was very soul destroying and so on, but you were still idealistic. You were better taught, you were better educated, no doubt about that there. And as your experience had furnished you with a lot of qualities which you would never acquired in life. To be able to look out on life and say, this is how I've seen it from the inside, and this is how I envisage it to be. And I mean, you're a young man, you spent the best years of your life in jail. You should have been out courting with girls. You should have been out going to dances, getting married, settling down, having a family, starting a business. But all that was completely cut off. And all those things, for some men, who went back out to families, it all worked very, very well for many of them. Not some, for many of them, they got back into their families, their wives stuck by them, their families stood by them. And that was a very, very good thing, I think, what came across. But for others, it was not the case at all, especially for men who were single. And by this time, quite a lot of men in the jails were single men, or mainly young men. I think I pointed out that at the time of internment in 1971, the average age of an internee would have been about 30. And after Bloody Sunday, the average age of a volunteer or prisoner was in the 20s. Do you understand? And that's the difference that came after Bloody Sunday, when people in droves attempted to join the armed struggle with whatever group they wished. A lot of them were brought back in again, a lot of them turned. So, I mean, for us coming out, we had a very, very hard time. It took me a long, long time to finally get my bearings, and went through an awful lot of trauma then, and I needed counselling. I didn't even know I needed counselling. And we eventually worked with an ex-prisoners group called XPAC, which was run by a fellow called Tommy McKierney. Tommy had been a well-known Republican and well-known family here in Tyrone and everything else. And Tommy realised that there was a lot of boys out there that needed help, which we're not getting from other groups who were mainly involved with the provisional IRA or the provisionals. And he managed to acquire funding to help ex-prisoners along the border area who were not affiliated to any group, who had cut their links, or for one reason or another, they cut the links there. But that group XPAC carried out an important bit of research and produced a document fairly into the effects of long-term imprisonment on the politically motivated prisoners. And it was researched by and produced and published by a fellow called Adrian Grounds, and there was a lot of research done into the effects of long-term imprisonment on men. And it was only then that came to light exactly the extent and depth of the trauma and the beatings of Long Kesh case blocks and what they endured, and that manifested itself in so many different ways. But anyway, the help was given, funding was obtained, and I'm trying to think. The name of that report, I think, was called No Sense of an Ending. And the term was taken from a soldier in the Vietnam War who was interviewed about when would, that conflict come to an end. And he just says, look, he says, there is no sense of an ending. And that's where that there title come from. And that report was produced. It was the first of its kind. And it reached in and examined all the aspects of the post-prison experience of a lot of political prisoners who had endured so much inside and now had been through the inferno of having to adapt and change on the outside in order to survive. Because that's exactly what it was. It was a crucible. Maybe that's a better word. But that crucible was ordinary life on the outside you had to adapt and change to. So eventually we did. Time has passed on. I mean, you can't encapsulate it also in 10, 15 minutes as to what was going on. This was right across the board. Hundreds of men, loyalist Republicans, and even among the screws, who they had suffered quite a lot too and brought it on themselves. And we had a load of suicides. The alcohol within the within so-called prison staff, the alcohol levels had risen dramatically. Many became alcoholics. They were carrying out and doing all the worst deeds, inhumane deeds, beating men who were naked and beating them and so on, right? They had to do that there, and in many cases they wanted to do it. But they paid the price in one respect, and in terms of their own personal lives, they paid another price. And many of them committed suicide. And it was a sad ending in many ways for a lot of things, but for us, we survived. We survived in a very real way, in that, well, first of all, we survived physically, and to some degree we had survived mentally and all, but we had overcome all the brutality, torture, psychological torture, being asked, we had survived all that there. And while we didn't all come out intact, the vast majority of us look back on that there particular period as a time when we were all brothers. And on the blanket in particular, you were a blanket man. You'd be lying in a cell naked 24 hours, 24/7 every day. And that created a certain bond and affinity with each other, which lasts down to this day. And that we have the shared experience of the Hughes block and the hunger strikes and the protests, and the no wash protests, and all the beatings and all the torture. And much the same as what they would have had endured in Bergen-Belsen or Dachau or Auschwitz and all the rest of those, whether it be German or Japanese war camps. And I'm quite sure the British Army, if they look back on their history, will quite remember the same affinity that existed within the ranks of all those men who were tortured in prison by the Japanese and starved, and they knew about it. But again, as I said, an awful lot of things have happened, and I think myself there's one good fact that's come out of all this year, and that we have learned an awful lot. Republicans have anyway. I don't know about some loyalists have, yes. In fact, maybe more than some. Now, one of the things I realised about them, and this go right, they didn't believe that they should have been in the jail, that they were fighting for Ulster, that they were fighting for the crown, that they were fighting the enemy who was there to destroy British imperialism and colonialism as they knew it, their way of life, and so on. Well, do you know how? A lot of them got a big comeuppance, and they left the cages with a different view of the British, their so-called allies, and so on. And a lot of them, like David Irvine had educated themselves within the jail, and others, and they were able to come out of that prison and see things in a different light altogether in relation to the conditions of largest working class communities as well. But on us, we came out and we became involved in community development projects right across the board. And I have a lot more than that there. You know, a lot of people were involved, say, for example, in Belfast, in the West Belfast, you know, festival, and trying to get away from the whole sort of, what do you call it, this legacy of violence, which we didn't need. And I think, you know, we've come out and we've been able to make a positive contribution to a lot of things, but more so to our own understanding of the troubles and how it affected us personally and how it affected us collectively. And I think myself, in doing so, we have defeated the jail experience as it was intended for us, and that we have come out of that there much more wiser, stronger, certainly more intellectual and educated. Not everybody, but quite a lot within the Republican. And all this has, in some way, culminated to some degree where we are today in terms of the Good Friday Agreement, in terms of where the Sinn Féin people are storming. And we can look back now and we see that even within this past couple of years, some massive changes have taken place. Demographically, the Nationalists are a majority in this 6-county statelet, an artificial statelet set up and established by a colonial regime in order to maintain a sectarian majority. And that was the whole purpose right up from 1924 until it all came to an end. And now we have not just demographics, but politics, and who's up in Stormont now and who's controlling all the Republicans. The British and their cohorts and their lackeys have now had to eat their words and saying, well, if these people were criminals, there must be an awful lot of 1,000 people voting them into power. Because that's what's happened here. So what has happened is we've seen a complete turnaround. We knew it was coming. Unions and Loyalists continue to stick their head in the sand. They don't want to acknowledge these changes. In fact, they're playing very much what they call it a rearguard action in relation to everything now. The whole mentality has been in many ways determined by and influenced by the siege mentality. And that siege mentality within Loyalists has been their Achilles heel throughout all the decades of that existence. In 1924, they might have thought it'd been a 1,000-year Reich, but that wasn't the case. It all came to an end not so long ago. And we have lived to see that there. We've lived to see all the different people, our young people now, very confident in their terms of identity and national identity, in terms of their cultural, in terms of linguistic and preferences relating to the Irish language, in terms of who they are and who they define themselves to be and how and so on. And ironically, that has all been well consolidated on a broad base. But ironically, within the Loyalist community, we're seeing the very opposite. They don't seem to know what identity they are. They don't know whether they're Northern Irish, whether they're Irish. They don't know whether they're British but not Irish, and so on. And unfortunately, the education did not, that they obtained but little of it, has not manifested itself in any way within Loyalism. But there's still hope.
Do you think within I suppose your lifetime and maybe if it takes longer, maybe mine, do you think we'll be seeing United Ireland?
Well, I'm now hitting 70 years of age, so in terms of chronology, if you want to put it that way, I don't think it's possible to sit down and say, after all these centuries of fighting, and especially within the last 40 years of fighting, that we can sit down and say there's going to be a United Ireland in what they call it 2052 or 2042, and it's going to be it'd be a bit like it reminds me a bit like the old Bishop Usher here in Armagh, who calculated that the Earth, from his biblical studies, that the Earth was 4,820 years old and was formed on October the 8th. And certain, we understand. Well, if you want to compare that there to us sitting and calculating as to when we're going to be United Ireland in terms of what year, no, I do believe that there will be United Ireland, and will be in terms of hearts and minds, and there'll be practicalities very much involved. And the old idealist John Nixon is not there. The realism is set in, and realism is born out of experience and your own acquirement of knowledge and so on. And I do believe that, yes, we will have a United Ireland, but as to what that United Ireland form is going to take place, well, it's like this. Somebody used to say, "Well, that's okay, but what are you going to do with over 1 million unionists?" You understand? This is the practicality of it all, and was ignored for a long time. So the real United Ireland will come to the yes. I do believe that there will be a political formula, an institutional formula, which is acceptable to all, in which we can all move along together, and that we will see that we have a lot in common, more in common will, that we have more to gain by working together. We always believed that, as far as unions are concerned, they were happy since the outset of this, the foundation of the statelet. They were quite happy to gather up the crumbs that fell from the banquet tables of the landlords and the lackey classes and the captains and so on of industry, who ruled Stormont on a total militaristic and sectarian basis. That is all gone. It's all wiped away. So much has changed. I'm not even going to mention technology.
Sorry, maybe as something to wrap up. You at one stage owned an art gallery in like a street or town that you actually once bombed, right?
Yes. Well, you're right. That is correct. I managed to get settled down anyway, and I started off selling stuff that just material I bought there from auctions and stuff like that there, and some of it was art. It wasn't all art, but I would go down to auctions and all, and buy stuff at auctions on spec and take it home, open up the shop, and sold it from the shop. And it gave me a focus in the role, and I had a wee bit of extra money in my pocket, but never as much as I needed. However, I done that there, and it was based in a place called Scott Street in Armagh. Scott Street would have been seen as a sort of a unionist location within Armagh City, where most of the what they called commercial buildings and other services were mainly within unionism, and that was the most bombed street in Armagh at one time. I can't remember how many bombs were put in that street. It has been built and rebuilt, and so on. Right, big long street leading downhill. Ironically, Armagh is divided in three quarters, on three things. There's our street, English Street, and Scott Street, and that's the nature of the town and its history. But Scott Street was well bombed, and I found myself back in that street, along with all the traders who were bombed, sitting up, selling out art, and selling all different types of stuff. And here I was, back in the most bombed street in Armagh town. There's an irony in that, and that people below me were trading. It's all changed now. It's not now. The unionist population within Armagh City, I'll give you an example. The last census, only 27% of the population in Armagh City identified as British in the last 2001 census. You understand? That 2011 census, remember 2021 census, what am I talking about? And it's looking at all the figures there recently, how things have changed demographically, you know, and the same within our town. So, I mean, our town is now almost what do you call it, 67% or no nationalists. That may not sound an awful lot to people, but when you think that the first civil rights march that was held there in 1968 was hijacked by Paisleyites who were armed with staves and shields and were able to stop that civil rights march coming down with the help of the police because it was going to bypass Scott Street. And this is where it really all started, back to square one and back to the shooting, dead, the murder of John Gallagher, not too far from the centre of the town or Scott Street. You understand? And here now we're living in this situation where I am now living in the middle of the town. I'm in the process of just moving back into the middle of the town and have traded and got on the best with a lot of the unionists in Armagh. And man, we don't hide our past. No, nobody does. And we're very, very clear about it. We have that confidence. We have that knowledge of where we stand, where we come from, and experience. And you know something? I think it's making for a better society. That we can learn now. I had a lot of people say, oh, we're going to have to learn to live together. And in many ways, that's a great ideal. But the harsh reality is this. We are still continuing to learn to live apart on that basis. And on the basis of that there, you know, we're slowly moving forward away from this old destructive, I wouldn't say that this whole, we're completely divided by so many different things. And I acknowledge that religion was an aspect of it, but I never accepted that religion was in any way at the core of it. But now, look where religion is now in relation to either the Catholic Church or to all the others. A lot of these things thrived during the Troubles, but then, you know, within, say, Free Presbyterian and stuff, and it was the political dimension to their existence and so on, but it's all gone. And all those forces and influences are all disappearing, and they're gone. And now we're merging into a whole new society with new generations coming along. And the people who are growing up are in their 20s now. People who weren't even born are in their 20s. People who were born maybe up to 20, 30. And they have a different attitude towards life. Of course, we do have all the old political shibboleths and all the old, what do you call it, you know, all the old arguments are still there. But I feel that we are moving inexorably forward towards a country. The recognition that we are a small island. The recognition also that, whether we like it or not, we're still tied in with Great Britain and all the other things, you know. And I'm starting to see attitudes where we can benefit economically, benefit politically, benefit in terms of infrastructure, whether it be for health reasons, for travel reasons, all the different infrastructures. So I see all these changes taking place. But what I do see is those who are holding on to the past. I'm talking about dissidents on the Republican side, and I'm talking about the so-called loyalist paramilitaries who are oppressing and destroying and decimating their own communities. And within republicanism, you have small micro groups of dissidents who will achieve nothing to be achieved, except to gain their own kudos. And they still remain in existence. And people say, oh, they're a threat to the peace process. They are no threat to the peace process. To stay that there would be to undermine every single thing that we have acquired and gained so far, for allow them or anybody to undermine all that has been achieved, and in fact, all that has not been achieved. So these people are going nowhere. As for the loyalists, well, I don't know if you ever heard of a man called Franz Fanon. And he was an Algerian, French Algerian. He wrote The Wretched of the Earth, and right, and the Algerian War of Independence. And it was great. And he says, after all colonial struggles, there's always what he called has been a deterioration into criminality. Do you understand? And that is happening within liberals and more so within republicanism. However, I do believe that we are moving forward, John. It's slow at times. It gains traction at all times. We can get a good grip and move on. And after all that I've come through, I can sit down and work things out. And you know how I can still be as bitter as anybody. I used to say as bitter as Billy Hutchinson or anybody in relation to what's happening on the surface of reality and everyday things. You know, an Orange March is banned here. Republican March is banned there. The police are doing this here against Republicans still. They have so much. We can go on all about that, but the forces of how the positivity are sort of. I think myself, there's more to look forward to in the future, and there has been for a long time. And it's just, as I say, taking its time. Things are changing big time. A slow recognition and awakening within the unionists, in particular unionist regime, the unionist communities, that things have changed. You know, so yes, and things have changed, but just not as utterly as one would like to.
Let me ask you as a final thing. Would you say that when you look back at all your time spent in the official IRA and the INLA, would you say that on balance, I'm sure there was some things that maybe you had to do you weren't proud of in hindsight and stuff, but on balance, would you say it's a time of it was a time of in your life that you look back on with pride that you were involved in it?
Yeah, well, you know, to said look back on with pride, that's a bit of a loaded question, John. But anyway, I look back on it with a whole lot of different things, in that the sense of loss, personal loss, but for us all, and the loss of our youth, the loss of that generation and the generations after us, and all the things that could have been achieved and done. And you know, how many times have we said, it's a bit like an old song, we didn't start the fire, but what we did inherit was a regime that had to meet with resistance and had to be destroyed. You understand? And I look back and I take pride and say, yes, I helped to do that there. But at all times there are regrets at where things went and certain people, within, well, for example, within republicanism. And I've all regrets of relating to, how would you say, having maybe not been able to given the opportunity to achieve things which I'd like to have done. I mean, at later years, I'll give you an example. I went back to Queen's University as an adult, and I enrolled for a BA course, Bachelor of Arts, honours. And it was a part-time course, took 5 years, but I stuck at it because I was really determined, and I graduated with the BA honours 2-1. Something which I would have thought in 1970s or 80s was only possible for those who were better and much better well off than I was, coming from the working class area, who literally had nothing but to go out and work. But I achieved that, and others and I achieved that, and we can see that whole thing within all that whole. It's all changing. I mean, we look at the many young nurses people are attending university. Education has always been seen as within within the national Republican community as the stepping stones to whatever it may be, social achievement and so on. But a lot of things have been lost, and it's not just about the life of our friends and our comrades and family members and everything but suffered. That's all part of it. So there has been regret there. Nobody's guffawing or gloating over any of that or whatsoever. I wouldn't like to think there'd be something seriously wrong with if you did. You need to be really full of hatred, pure and bitter, unadulterated hatred, to sit back and say, "Oh, thank fuck I shot that bastard," or "Thank God I murdered this one," and "Thank God them were all killed," and so on. You can carry that load with you, but from the human point of view, the humanistic point of view, it will destroy you, and so will and jail will also destroy you if you let it. Jail will leave you bitter. It will leave you full of desire for vengeance and revenge, and it can do all the things, especially in the political sense, you know. But we survived it all, and I do believe that what was gained, and which we can all take pride on, is that we have learnt a lot, and we know how to read the landscape really well, and we can negotiate this ourselves together. I do believe in that there, but so much. It's easy said, in fact, it's easy said and quickly said, but it never came so quickly. That's about it I can tell you, John.
Very good. No, thank you. I appreciate the insight of that answer. Yeah, you get different you get some different answers to that question. It's always interesting. Again, now thank you very much for the many hours we spent through all our interviews. I appreciate everything you shared. Now it can't have been easy to kind of dredge up the
No,
thoughts and
that's
memories.
just the point. That's just the point. You see, it never is easy because people like myself, and there's plenty of other people went through a hell of a lot more than me. I had in the end, but when the trouble's finished, I had the last race 3 times. I was given the last race 3 times by 3 different priests. Okay, I was lying shot, stomach and all blew out, the whole abdomen got cleaned out when I was getting the first race by a Father Pat McDonald in Armagh, who also gave the last race to my mate who died beside me near enough. And then in the jail, I got the last rites again from Father Toner, the prison chaplain, on the hunger strike. We were all given the last rites if we wanted them. I don't know who took them, but they're all on offer. And then I got the last rites again from a Father Raymond Murray, Monsignor Murray. And that was, he had come in and had given me the last rites on the first hunger strike. But wasn't aware of the fact that we had got it, you understand? But anyway, the point I'm making is look, me tell you, there's so many things when you were close to death. And you know something now? Being there, I think it equips you or furnishes you with an experience in this world that nobody else will ever have, and which is so unique, will never be repeated. And I think myself that has been something that has been given us for a reason. I'm not going to start about God and Bible or synchronicities and everything else, no, but some things do happen for a reason. And if you accept the essence of that there, then, you know, I can only hope now that the future ahead is going to be a lot better. And as far as I'm concerned, I can see all the signs and I read them all in a different way, that it's looking good. It's looking positive. But there's still some dark clouds hanging about that horizon.
Thank you very much. Now again, was there anything you maybe wanted to mention before we go, or anything you wanted to just drop in?
Well, it's very, very hard to convey to the listener when you're sitting here on a Zoom and using all this technology and you can't interact with them personally. You can't see them. No, the people who are listening here. And you can only hope that you've given some sort of portrayal. They might not agree with, most likely a lot of them will not, and others are so. But I would just like to convey to people that, you know, when we were in the jail, I'll finish off on this. And I wrote an article about it. We had one book within the prison in the cell which we were allowed to keep, and that was the Bible. And I am not a big Bible fan. I don't have any religion at all whatsoever. I don't have any organized religion. Spiritual person as a result of a lot of things. But we read the Bible because in the Old Testament you had history, the history of the Hebrews and the history of this, that, and the other, and you could read about right up to the Romans and in the good. But we had the thing called a Bible called the Catholic Truth Society, which had annotations. And I remember reading in small script, if you want to call it, this cliche. It may have come from Thomas Aquinas, I don't know. And he said that suffering is the divinely appointed means towards God. Well, you know, one would like to think that there. And you could also say, God, I've been through so much. That's it. I'm okay. I'll reach heaven. But the harsh reality is, right, suffering is a divinely appointed means for what life is like or can be like on earth and what you learn from it. Do you understand? In other words, that it's not towards some sort of Godhead figure, right? But it is more practical in religion. It happens here. And you can pass that on. And I hope that I'd be able to pass on all my experience, knowledge, and everything else in a positive way. It will help people stay out of jails. It will not contribute in any way to conflict. And will show people that we have learned a lot, we can move on. And it's time to forgive. We may never forget. And in many cases, we will never forgive. But at least we can lay down the foundations for the future generations. And I think that there is what we have learned from all the suffering, and that we owe it to the future generations, and that we have lost those generations in the past. And we need to move on and help those in the future. The generations of the future is what means the most to us. What's this here, Bobby Sane says? Our laughter, the laughter of our children, I think he said,
the laughter of our children will be our revenge.
Would be our revenge. I don't know where the word revenge, but I can understand where Bobby Sands is coming from there. And it's something that I never thought I'd hear myself quoting. But I do it more so now than ever, because he was right. The only thing that matters is not this generation which is fading very quickly, but the future generation of young people. And it is our duty and obligation, born out of everything that we have been through, to help them to have a more secure, better life than anything else. And I think myself that is what we should channel all the sum total of all our experience and knowledge, all our learning, reading, and everything else that we have learned, and all the suffering and the pain and torture. We need to ball it all up and find some way that we can channel that to help